Well, good evening and welcome to our first of two candidate programs focusing on the elections for the Cerro Gordo County Board of Supervisors. I'm Bob Fisher, the news director for the Koloff Media radio stations here in Mason City, 103.7 The Fox and 98.7 Kiss Country. I'm also in charge of the news website, NorthIowaNow.com. And I hope you'll help the word out about this new effort of bringing you local news through our radio stations and our website. Throughout the next couple of weeks leading up to Election Day, we'll be having more information regarding the candidates that you'll see on your ballot for the November general election here on NorthIowaNow.com. Tonight's program focuses on the candidates for the 1st District. Now, that includes all the Mason City's 3rd Ward, Ward 2, Precinct 2, and Ward 4, Precincts 2 and 3. And let's meet our candidates. Incumbent Republican Chris Watts, as you see him on the screen, he's on the right. He was born and raised in Eagle Grove. He spent 10 years managing Jake's Pizza, Mason City, and for the last 35 years has been with Performance and Reinhardt Food Service. He's been a member of a number of service clubs over the past 43 years, including the JCs, the Elks Lodge, and Moose Lodge. Longest fundraising activities have included raising funds for the 19th Street Southeast Lilac Project along the roadway and trail, as well as raising funds for a number of improvement projects for Georgia Hanford Park in Mason City. He is seeking his 3rd term on the County Board of Supervisors. Democrat Timothy Lapointe is a Mason City native who has been a lawyer for 34 years and has practiced law in Mason City for over 32 years. Lapointe served 10 years on the county's compensation board, as well as served for 24 years on the bipartisan Iowa Telecommunications and Technology Commission. Lapointe has also served as a member of the Red Cross Board, president of the North Iowa AIDS Coalition, as well as president of the Legal Services Workers Union. Gentlemen, I want to thank you for agreeing to sit down and discuss the issues facing county government with me tonight. And I want to quickly go over what our format of our discussion will be tonight. We held a blind draw before the start of tonight's event to determine who will give the first answer to the first question and give the first of the closing statements. I have a list of questions and topics that we'll be discussing this evening. This list was not provided ahead of time to either candidate, but the candidates were allowed to make suggestions ahead of time regarding questions and topics that they'd like to see included in our discussion. Questions will be addressed in an unbiased manner to each candidate in a rotating format. There will not be a hard time limit on the length of an answer a candidate can give to allow the candidates not to feel rushed in giving their answer. And as moderator, I will encourage candidates to wrap up their thoughts if an answer is extra lengthy, in the interest of trying to allow both candidates an equal amount of time to respond, as well as in attempting to get as many questions as possible in during this program. With most questions, we'll ask each candidate to take a turn in answering the question. And if I feel there needs to be discussion, we'll have a follow-up or rebuttal opportunity for each candidate. Candidates are instructed to not use their time during a question to readdress the previous question. If they do so, I, as moderator, will instruct the candidate to stay on the topic of the question. And at the end of our program, each candidate will be allowed 2 minutes to give their final message to voters. We'll allow each candidate a few extra seconds to wrap up if they are at that 2-minute mark, but we'll stop a candidate if too much time has been taken. Once again, we held a blind draw to determine our order, and Mr. Lapointe will be giving the first answer to our first question. And the first question, tell voters why in your district, why they should be voting for you as opposed to your opponent.
Well, thank you, Bob. Thank you for the opportunity to attend this forum and to establish why voters should vote for me over my opponent. I appreciate the question. I think it's a good question, and everyone deserves a proper answer. They should vote for me over my opponent because I have the experience to lead county government, not just get by, as I believe my opponent has done for the last 6 years, but truly lead in issues affecting Cerro Gordo County, the CO2 pipeline, wind and solar issues, which I favor, and a host of difficult issues that I have been on the forefront of and studied these issues for several years. Workers in the county should vote for me because I'm strongly supporting increased funding for workers in Cerro Gordo County. I was on the county compensation board for 10 years. I saw my opponent almost single-handedly attempt to and successfully reduce wages for county elected officials during that time. I decided then that You know, at some point, if I had the opportunity, I'd like to run for this position, use my skills as a bipartisan leader on the Iowa Telecommunications and Technology Commission, use my skills as a volunteer on several boards in this area, use my experience at the Cerro Gordo County Courthouse for 32 years to truly lead and successfully grow the county through cooperation with the Chamber of Commerce, the City of Mason City, in some cases, the City of Clear Lake, visit Mason City, North Iowa Now, and other economic development agencies to make this county better than it was before. And I think I can do that better than my opponent. That's why voters should vote for me.
All right, Mr. Watts.
Well, I think my experience as a county supervisor, and it'll be 8 years. And when I first ran, I told everybody term limits. I believe in term limits. And I said 3 terms and I'm done. This is my 3rd and final term. With my former colleagues, Mr. Callanan and Mr. Latham, we were very successful in turning the county around to the 21st century. There was a lot of outdated facilities in the county, a lot of outdated equipment, a lot of safety issues. There still are. And we've been addressing those aggressively the last 8 years, and I want to continue doing what we've been doing. And I see the county flourishing better than what it has. We're sitting pretty good for economic development. We sit between Des Moines and Minneapolis. We got all the transportation, roads, planes, trains. We got the resort area. We should be booming right now, and I want to see that through. And I sit on the Economic Development Commission right now, and we have a lot of good things coming. Again, finishing those activities. I'm very active in the community. I'm a hands-on guy. People know I don't just represent District 1. I represent the entire county. Somebody from Thornton calls me, somebody from Doherty, Rockwell, wherever, it doesn't matter. I respond. There's a lot of times I go out and look at the problem. I go out with the engineer, look at the drainage issues, look at roads, bridges. I want to continue that. I'm a hands-on guy. I like to see what I'm dealing with and properly address it. And as far as fiscal responsibility, I think the county's in the best fiscal responsible position that we've been in years. Our predecessors, Mr. Erdahl, Mr. Amos, and Mr. Doherty left us sitting pretty good. And we've been able to work with what they left us and make these improvements. And I want to keep doing that.
Let's move on to the next question without going into multiple issues. And if you do so, I will interrupt and ask that you stay focused just to one. What is the single most important issue surrounding the government of Cerro Gordo County today, Mr. Watts?
Around the government in Cerro Gordo right now, I don't see a whole lot of issues. I think most departments are working well together. There's the union thing will be coming up here the first part of the year. So we'll be working with the union. We have 2 unions, the courthouse union and the sheriff's union. So we'll be working with them. But all in all, I think the government flow at the courthouse runs pretty smooth.
All right, Mr. Lapointe.
I think the single most important issue is the CO2 pipeline at this point. And I have studied this issue extensively. I am adamantly opposed to the CO2 pipeline. I'm the only candidate who wrote a letter to the editor early on in my campaign. I think it was before March of this year. I've also posted several articles on my Facebook pages about the CO2 pipeline and the perils of that. I'm against it because it'd be an incredible waste of water, 47 million gallons a day if this plan goes through in all of the ethanol plants in Iowa. And along with that, clean energy solutions, wind and solar is a big issue. Currently, there's a moratorium because the current board felt that they shouldn't even talk about it. I'm for education on these issues. I've been to meetings. I've been to meetings on the pipeline. I've been to meetings on wind and solar. I've studied the issues. I've read the 507-page Iowa Utilities Board opinion on the pipeline, and I've read the 100-page decision by the Planning and Zoning Commission on wind and solar. And I'm ready to lead on those issues and not just kick the can down the road with a moratorium on wind and solar.
I do have questions about both of those topics that you addressed, Mr. Lapointe, coming up in future questions. So instead of doing a rebuttal round here, I think we're going to move on to the next question. And Mr. Lapointe, you start with this next question. One of the biggest questions that you two clashed on during the League of Women Voters candidate forum earlier this month was the issue of salaries for elected officials, specifically elected officials. Supervisors have agreed to freeze their salaries for a number of years while agreeing to salary increases for their fellow elected officials as recommended by the county's compensation board. Would you continue the supervisor pay freeze policy in the near future? And what kind of salary increases should be agreed to for the other elected officials? Mr. Lapointe.
Bob, I strongly believe that county workers should get fair pay for the hard work that they do. And that includes the supervisors. They deserve a raise just like the rest of the county officials. I do not agree with freezing pay for the supervisors or any of the other officers. And I believe that going forward, it sounds like due to the new issues about the county compensation board at the state level, that the county supervisors may have even more say on county worker pay, maybe not just county elected officials going forward. So I think it's even more important now to have someone like me on the board that's going to say we're going to at least give these hardworking county employees a cost of living adjustment type raise, one that is at least within a point of cost of living. We've had years where it's been 2 points less than the cost of living, and my opponent has gone in. His representatives on the compensation board have started the negotiations at zero. I favor at least cost of living raises for all county elected officials and all county workers under the purview of the Board of Supervisors.
Mr. Watts.
Well, to start with, the compensation board makes the recommendations to the Board of Supervisors. And so the Board of Supervisors could have never started at zero because the comp board has never given us a zero to start with. And my opponent sat on the compensation board for several years. And as I talked about, I could have been wrong on the 16%. It might have been 14%, but that's public record. Anybody can look that up. It was proposed for elected county officials. That's huge. Our county attorney is approximately $150,000 a year. You take a 15% pay raise on top of that. That's huge money. That's for the elected officials.
Close to that.
That's for the elected officials. That's not for the workers, the ones that are actually doing the work. Your questions in regards to the elected officials, and the elected officials, I think, do very well. And as a supervisor, we were right now the 11th largest county in the state, I believe, and we're the 9th highest paid right now. We're above the average. Before, when we froze the pay raise, it was considerably higher than that. So in 8 years, it's taken us this long to get down to almost a parity in regards to other counties. $52,000 a year is what the county supervisors are paid. And I believe I put in the time for it. I don't want a raise. I never did it for the money. I did it to give back to Cerro Gordo County.
Mr. Lapointe, rebuttal.
Thank you, Bob. First of all, I never proposed a raise of anywhere near 14%. I may have voted in favor of Farouk Jessa's proposal at one time for something in that neighborhood.
And I'm going to interrupt you. In December 2022, as you remember, the comp board, you did make a motion to 12%.
I may have done that after the 14% was proposed, and then it went to zero and went to 12. It ended up around 5 or 6 when cost of living was higher than that. So my opponent,
I just wanted to remind you what you did making a motion to. So
my opponent has told people who have told me that I favored a 19% increase. At the League of Women Voters Forum, he said in front of everybody there and on on radio that it was 16. Tonight he says 14. You indicated in an article that I read that at one point I favored a 12% increase. That was not the final say on the matter. That was still in the negotiation phase, and it ended up several points below that and still below what was fair, what is still below cost of living, because Mr. Watts says that the Board of Supervisors never proposed that because it has to come to him. His representative, Steve Meinert, on the board proposed 0 time and time again. And this was at Mr. Watts's direction.
Mr. Watts, your final rebuttal.
My opponent was one of the county supervisor's representatives at one time before we didn't reappoint him. He went to a different office and was representing them. And those raises were higher also. We have given the cost of living percentage pretty much every year. And, you know, to be fair to the taxpayers, I mean, how many taxpayers get a 2 3/4 or 3.5 or a 4% pay raise every year? They don't. And why isn't just because you're a government official, whether it's city, county, or state, why should you get an automatic pay raise every year? I was in the private sector for 10 years, and, you know, there was such a thing as merit back then. If you weren't worth a darn, you didn't get a raise. But now everybody gets a raise across the board. I'm not saying we have people that are slackers, but there are some that do better than others. You know, maybe they should get a better hike than those that don't pull their fair share of the load. But I believe we've treated the employees fairly, and they've got the cost of living every year. And one other thing to keep in mind, the average taxpayer out there listening right now, they don't get IPERS. County employees get IPERS. That's Iowa Public Employer Retirement System. That's a benefit that the average citizen does not get.
Now, and we'll move on to the next question. It does deal with a segment of county government and salaries. Just to give my full question here, during the recent League of Women Voters Candidate Forum that you both participated in, the candidates for sheriff discussed the issue of employee recruitment and retention. Do the supervisors in future budgets need to budget more money to try to address this, especially when both candidates for sheriffs say that deputies in some of the surrounding counties are making upwards of $20,000 to $25,000 a year more than what's being offered here in Cerro Gordo County? Mr. Watts, your start.
I believe it needs to be addressed. And again, that's where the union comes into play. And I believe we'll start talking about that probably about December-ish. Yeah, the deputies in Winnebago and Mitchell probably make more than the deputies here. We had the big Back the Blue bill a couple of years ago, and the sheriff and the lead deputies got the increase, but the other deputies did not. And I'd like to see that changed. And one of the other ones that has been grossly overlooked is the dispatch out there. And dispatch is pretty much front line. They're on the phone with people that are, you know, most recently a person burning up in her car listening to this while they're on the phone with them. They're the ones that are under the stress. They're the ones listening until the ambulance or the officers get there. And dispatch needs to be addressed as well as the other deputies also.
Mr. Lapointe.
Yes, raising salaries, not only for the sheriff's races, but for other county offices is extremely important for retention and recruitment. We have lost good people because their salaries have been reduced due to the budget cuts that were primarily espoused by my opponent, Chris Watts. County assessor left town. We had a assistant county attorney leave town. I have been approached by several department heads that have said that budget requests were put to Chris Watts and just flatly denied or severely reduced with no good reason. This is how you lose good people from Cerro Gordo County to other counties and other states that are paying a better wage. It's just simple economics. If they can go to Mitchell County and make 25% more, I'm surprised more of them haven't left. If they can go to the Mesa City Police Department and make more money, they're going to do it. To retain good workers and recruit good workers, we need to pay a better wage than we've been paying. We're losing good people. and that's not good for economic development or anybody here in Cerro Gordo County.
Mr. Watts, rebuttal.
In the courthouse, I don't believe we've lost many employees. The one person in the assessor's office he's referring to happens to be his niece, and she went out to California, and
That's correct.
she was close to $100,000 a year employee. So, I mean,
She was
Wait.
worth 120.
well, they're the ones that the county assessor and city assessor are the ones that look at your taxes, and they're the ones that raise your taxes in the county also.
Mr. Lapointe, final thought.
Final thought, again, his whole policy is we got to get the salaries down to a level that is equal to our population ranks statewide. How about getting them a little bit higher so that we have a little bit better chance of recruiting good people? What's the matter with being 8% in salary rank when we're 9 or 10 or 11% in population rank? That means more people are going to come here and stay here. That simple economics, economic development policy, it needs to change from where my opponent has had it for the last 6 years.
All right. Next question, Mr. Lapointe, you'll start. To what level should a county supervisor be involved in the day-to-day operations at the courthouse and the different departments of the county?
Good question, Bob. I think the county supervisors should act in a supervisory role, but and all the boards and commissions I've been on over the years, I have kind of gravitated towards those people that have agreed with me that unless someone is doing a poor job, they should not be micromanaged in their directorial position and authority. And we have really good people at the courthouse. I talked to Scott Hand, who is recently retired as the court administrator. He and others have indicated that they don't necessarily appreciate trying to be micromanaged by the Board of Supervisors. And I think you could go to all the directors and say they're running a pretty tight ship. Their budgets, I've looked at this information for 10 years on the comp board before this. They're all running they're doing a great job. That's one of the reasons they should get raises, but they're also managing their staff well. And we shouldn't have county supervisors that literally walk around and question people, directors at the courthouse, about what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, unless it's causing a problem.
Mr. Watts.
Well, Scott Hand was the court administrator on the second floor, and he did recently retire. And he's an employee of the state. And by state law, we're required to provide them space in the courthouse. And I've never asked him to do anything. Yeah. And I think I had a very good working relationship with him. As far as the department heads, whether it be the county auditor, county treasurer, IT director, public health, sheriff, they're elected officials. I don't talk to their employees or tell them. I don't think I ever have told them anything that they need to do. If I have a problem with something, I go talk to their director, the elected official. That's the chain of command, and they're the elected official. They're the ones responsible to the taxpayers.
Mr. Lapointe, any response?
Yes, I'm sorry, I kind of laughed or choked there because that was directly opposite of what I had been told. I had been told that Mr. Watts had tried to micromanage the court administration, who's not even a county. Like he said, it's not supervised directly by the county, but they wanted to move the jury rooms around on the second and third floor, or the second floor of the courthouse, and wanted to acquire the parking lot that the judges had been using for Board of Supervisors and other county purposes. So this is a type of micromanagement that really is not appreciated or necessary at the county Board of Supervisor level.
Mr. Watts, final thought.
Well, I would call that BS because the parking lot outside, Tom Meyer, our Director of Administrative Services, makes recommendations to the Board of Supervisors, and we took them up on those recommendations. And considering the judges and they're at a little higher risk, Tom's suggestion was the parking spots closer to the doors so they don't have to walk distant when they're late in the day or as far as being accosted or anything like that. So we took the direction of the person that we have appointed or have asked to do that kind of stuff, and that was Tom Meyer. And we took those suggestions. That's as far as the parking lot space. As far as jury rooms, I don't think you could have moved a jury room on second floor because there's no other place to put one. And they're definitely not on the third floor because that's the old jail.
Moving on to the next question, Mr. Watts, you'll start this time. How important is the role of these supervisors in dealing with economic development?
Very important. And that's called working with the local entities, whether it's the city of Clear Lake, city of Thornton. It's not just Mason City and Clear Lake, and a lot of people seem to think that, but it's all the communities in this county that comprise, and it's not just you don't want to throw all your eggs in one basket. We try and work with all the communities on economic development. Most recently, Thornton with the elevator. It was a big deal down there for Thornton. So, and we just raised our and I don't want to say donation, but our amount that we put into the economic development by $10,000 this year, because they are doing a good job, and it does cost money to lure other companies here and show them what North Iowa has to offer.
Mr. Lapointe?
Thank you. This is one of the hallmarks of my campaign, Bob. Economic development. Local government should be about economic development first and foremost. And I propose to work with the Mason City Chamber of Commerce, of which I am an active member. Been invited to the Day on the Hill by the chamber leadership, and went there with the mayor of Mason City, Clear Lake, other elected officials. And my opponent was not there. And we talked to people on the Hill, and as the mayor said, created a presence, a welcoming presence for North Iowa. This is how you get things done at the State House. You become well known with the parties that are holding the pocketbook. And we need to do more of that. And when I got active with the chamber again this year, what I was told, I asked county business leaders, I asked the chamber director, I asked a North Iowa corridor director, what can a county supervisor do for you as far as economic development, and what can be done better? And what I was consistently told was more advocacy for Cerro Gordo County would be much appreciated. That's when I immediately signed up for the bus trip to the North Iowa Day on the Hill. I want to aggressively recruit wind and solar energy initiatives to grow the economy. The way you fund agencies and people who help people, as I call them, is to grow the economy first with aggressive economic development. Then you have more money for discretionary spending. What my opponent has done, and has been proud to admit for the last 6 years, is to cut as much as he can so that he can be, quote, fiscally responsible, end quote, to the citizens of the county, saving them money, not ever spending, putting moratoriums on the biggest programs, and not going out beyond his small realm to actively recruit major projects to this county.
Mr. Watts, response.
Well, you mentioned micromanagement a little bit ago. My opponent did. And so micromanaging the Economic Development Commission would be stupid. We have an absolute terrific director, Chad Schreck, and he has an excellent staff in his office. And we have an excellent board, which I sit on, and they've actively been recruiting for North Iowa. So I'm not going to micromanage them. I'm going to support them in every way we possibly can. When you talk about economic development, I think I have a proven track record with the funds that our predecessors had left us in regards to fixing the infrastructure here in Cerro Gordo County, which has been massive. Tim Latham, Casey Callanan, and myself came up with a plan, sat down there and implemented, and it was 8 years ago and not 6 years ago. And with the infrastructure improvements, that's what you build economic development on. That's what attracts industry to North Iowa. They want to come see if our roads are in bad repair. We have bridges that farmers used to have drive 4 miles around to get to the field on the other side. The drainage, I mean, it was just tremendously wrong and outdated. And that's what we've been fixing. And that's what attracts economic development to our area.
Mr. Lapointe, final thoughts.
Thank you, Bob. 8+ million of the infrastructure funds came from federal funds to this county from the Biden infrastructure and Build Back Better Act. This county has not created real economic development at the county level, I would venture to say, since Chris Watts has been in office, other than the money that's been handed to them by the federal government. I want to change that. I want to think outside the box. I want to travel the state, the country, and the world with the North Iowa economic development people and bring real jobs back to Cerro Gordo County.
Moving on to the next question, and both of you have been on record for being against the carbon capture pipelines. Mr. Watts, mainly potential of eminent domain use involving a person's private property. Mr. Lapointe, you made your comments earlier, probably expands to even more outside of the eminent domain issue with other things. Now, setting aside the eminent domain segment of the carbon capture pipeline issue, one of the biggest reasons the carbon capture process is being proposed is the potential growth for ethanol plants here in Iowa and creating sustainable aviation fuel. The carbon capture pipeline method being the most cost-effective process in the manufacturing process for this type of fuel. To have individual ethanol plants stored to remove carbon on their own is cost prohibitive. What's your message to the two ethanol production companies here in this county, a third biofuels company that has plans for a facility here, as well as the farmers, suppliers of those plants who want to move their product into this next phase of their future? Mr. Lapointe.
Thank you. Great question. Well researched. I appreciate that. I've been to the meetings on this. I've read thousands of pages of material on the CO2 pipeline. I didn't come to my decision lightly to oppose it. They have some pros. I made a list myself of the pros and cons. One of the pros is it stands to raise the price of corn. That's a good argument on their side. And it will, due to the scoring, will be available for SAF, sustainable aviation fuel, if it all goes through. The problem is it's dangerous. They don't have a safety plan. They don't have electronic emergency vehicles ready. And if there's a pipeline burst, which has happened in places like Sulphur, Louisiana, they don't have a plan. It's an incredible waste of water. It's eminent domain for private gain. And what I would say to these ethanol plants, as an answer specifically to your question, and the biodiesel, there are better ways to capture carbon. There are safer ways. I want to work with them to find solutions to capture carbon, help save the environment in a more efficient and safer ways. And this, what I've heard and read numerous times, is the overall capture would be about 1.5% of the carbon from these plants. Now they try to reduce it to the capture at a certain point of the plant and say it's 85%, but the real overall capture is about a 1.5%. We can capture more carbon safer, easier, and less expensively. And I want to work with our local people to be a model to the country for how to do that.
Mr. Watts.
To some extent, I agree with my opponent on there. I mean, massive waste of water. We're talking about the Jordan Aquifer, and water is very, very important on an everyday basis to everybody. And to waste that kind of water, natural resource, is just sad. I believe in our ethanol plants. I think they've done a fine job here, and I do believe there's a better way to do it. And hopefully the carbon capture thing is not, or carbon solutions is not going to happen, because we're waiting on Illinois and South Dakota. And it doesn't sound like South Dakota's sitting on their side right now. So hopefully it'll be a moot issue. I'm sure it'll probably end up in court, like everything does, but I just don't think it's a safe thing. And the other key issue about this is I was elected by the people to represent the people, and the people spoke out, and the people don't want it. And I'm here to represent the people and stand by that.
All right, we're going to move on to the next question. I'm going to try to get in as many questions here as in the next 25 minutes or so that we have your time with us here. So, and if we need to, we'll rehash an answer if need be. Mr. Watts, your start here. We talked about the process of addressing the future of wind and solar energy in the county. Mr. Lapointe talked about that earlier. Talk about, what the county's position should be at this point on wind and solar energy.
Well, as I just finished my last statement, elected to represent the people, and the people right now are saying no. And when I first ran, originally, I favor wind and solar. I believe in renewable energies and whatnot, but the way they're coming down or the way they're coming at us is just too strong. You're talking about a 3,500 acre solar farm down by Birchnell. And to put that in perspective, for the people who don't know what 3,500 acres is, Clear Lake, the body of water, is 3,600 acres. So you think about that. That's a huge, huge chunk of farmland out of production. We're the third in the top three as far as best dirt in the world, black soil they call it. And the farmer is very, very important. We had 5 public meetings, and that's not counting all the other special meetings that planning and zoning had. I was at every one of those 5 meetings, and I was at every one of those special meetings, and my opponent was at one, and that was at the courthouse.
Mr. Lapointe, your rebuttal?
Yes, I was at that one meeting at the courthouse. I also got briefed on several other meetings in other counties, and I've extensively studied the issue. I've read very carefully the 100-page planning and zoning report on they recommended a moratorium for wind and solar, including the Dale Casper's dissenting report, which said that was not the way to go. I agree with him that it is foolish to say that we should just put a moratorium on these major projects that are ready and experienced and ready to bring big economic development to Cerro Gordo County. And with regard to the solar issues, the people I've talked to say they're not seeking to take prime Iowa farmland. They can't do that. They're not doing it by the use of eminent domain like the pipeline. So it would be cost prohibitive to take prime Iowa farmland out of production. Also, there's an argument, and I think Mr. Casper addresses this in his report, that set-asides have been talked about as a way to replenish the soil, protect our topsoil from being blown away and eroded and used improperly for the future. And one of the ways that we can fallow our farmland is by solar panels, which the soil can be repurposed after their end date. So for generations to come, you're not taking that topsoil when you're talking about solar and wind energy. I've traveled this state extensively, and there are wind farms all over, and they're not causing undue noise, or I don't see great big graveyards of solar turbines like they want us to believe. Where are they? I mean, you'd think they're enormous things. You'd think you'd see them. I've been to these meetings. There's about 100 people that go around and are extremely vocal, but the vast majority of the county citizens and the ones that have talked to me, especially in my district, they like wind and solar. They're not like the neighboring landowners that are very against it and very vocal.
Let's try to do a quick 30-second rebuttals here, Mr. Watts.
Okay.
Because I've got a lot of questions.
Okay, just to start with, reading a report as my opponent has said, versus actually going to the meetings and listening to the people are two different things. I went to those meetings and the people are speaking out, not saying what's actually going to happen yet. The moratorium was put in place to give us more time to study, research, talk to our legal people in Des Moines, and that's where we're at right now. And the moratorium expires at the end of the year.
Mr. Lapointe, once again, quick final response.
Yeah, you mentioned the legal people. I've been to several meetings, if not dozens, since I starting running for this position, including meetings where the Board of Engineers or the county engineer is top on the agenda, Brandon Billings, as he is in almost every meeting. One of the drainage district meetings, they said the number one highest budget spend in the engineer's office is for legal fees. I am uniquely qualified to interpret these very difficult legal contracts for Cerro Gordo County.
All right. Next question. Property taxes are an ongoing issue. New property tax laws were enacted by the legislature in 2023 that provided property tax relief starting this fall while limiting local government spending. Rumors are starting to fly about legislation going to be introduced in the upcoming session that could limit cities and counties to a hard 2% growth, as well as other changes to the local option sales tax. What impacts does the county face in the near future with what has been enacted and what possibly could be enacted? Mr. Lapointe, you start.
Thank you, Bob. I think that makes it all the more important that we aggressively recruit economic development projects such as wind and solar to our county. We're stuck now at a 3% cap on growth for the county. And due to the complicated system of levies where we have to assess and then give half to the state and then get some money back, and we're left with very little discretionary funding to fund a lot of these worthwhile programs that come to the county and ask for help. We need to get so much more if it's going to go down to 2%, which we have good reason to believe it will. I was at, as my opponent was, Habitat for Humanity groundbreaking yesterday. Wonderful event. It's the biggest one they had. And I was embarrassed as a candidate that the county, Cerro Gordo County, was not a sponsor for that event. The city of Mason City was. I'm also embarrassed that the county, Cerro Gordo County, gave half as much to the Child Care Works program as did the city of Mason City. And we've had more money. The county has had more money. Why is that? It's because these things that are ultimately fitting perfectly in my priorities and my platform, humanitarian efforts, which are funded by aggressive economic development, it's not been a priority for my opponent.
Mr. Watts.
Well, as Mr. Burnett just stated this last week in regards to the 2% possible, that's more of a reason why, as my opponent accuses me of being fiscally responsible, that's why you want to be fiscally responsible, because right now the county is sitting in a pretty good spot. The only debt the county has left is the law enforcement center. We refinanced that, brought it back to a local bank, so that is staying here in the county, and that debt will be retired within the next 6 months, I believe. The county will be debt free, and we'll be in a better position to ride that storm out until we see something that happens. As far as the Habitat for Humanity thing, yes, I was at that event yesterday, as I try and attend as many events as I can, and we did fund them. And we have at the beginning of the year when we do budgeting, and if and when Mr. Lapointe gets in, he'll see that and understand that better. But outside funding is done during our budget process. And we did do donations to Habitat for Humanity as we do crisis intervention, which is very important to me also.
My next question deals with something else that Mr. Lapointe brought up in his answer. There's been efforts in Cerro Gordo County this past year to help address child care needs. The county approved a $50,000 pledge to support the Cerro Gordo County Child Care Works Coalition's efforts to address understaffed care centers. What more does the county need to do to continue to address this issue? Mr. Watts, you start.
We need to continue on with the program and see if we can get more participants in it. Right now, we're a pilot program in the state, and I sit on several committees with other supervisors in other areas, and they're they're kind of wanting to jump on board too. So we just had a meeting this last Thursday, and I was with 2 other counties, and they're looking into it also. But it has been a good thing because the workforce has been in dire straits for some time, and it's hard for a young person to take their kid to daycare and go work, and their paycheck pretty much goes to daycare. So this funding that we're doing, that we're part of a pilot program, who knows, next year the funding could be higher. It depends. That's being addressed on the state level too, I believe. And the more we can help the daycare facility situation out and get these people back into the workplace, the better.
Mr. Lapointe.
Thank you. Thank you. This is also part of my platform, is to extend the Child Care Works program. It's my understanding that the funds they have expired. This pilot program is at an end, and people are now starting to brainstorm on how to continue it because it's been so successful. I want to ensure that Cerro Gordo County, and if I'm elected, I will do all I can to ensure that Cerro Gordo County has funds available to work with the city of Mason City and others, not just those 2 entities, Chamber of Commerce, to fully fund Child Care Works program for the next 4 years. And I want to take it even one step further. And one of the questionnaires I got in running for this office, they asked about my position on training for county workers. Training is a huge part of the job. It's a part, you have to be educated and keep up with your education to be good at whatever you do. And so I would say not only should the Child Care Works program and Cerro Gordo County, in funding that, help pay for child care for people to go to work and get them back in the workforce, but also for training for unemployed people that might be able to go get a certification to fill a job that's open. So one of the biggest issues, according to the Chamber of Commerce here, is we have unmet workforce needs. That's why Child Care Works is such a great program. If we could get them trained and pay for their child care while they get trained as well, that could be another great benefit addition to that program.
Next question, infrastructure. Are there things that need to be addressed with county infrastructure at this time, Mr. Lapointe?
Yes, always. Secondary roads are a huge part of what the Cerro Gordo County Board of Supervisors oversee. And I think they do a good job, the county engineer, of overseeing that and reporting. You've been to a lot of the meetings, Bob, as well, seen Brandon Billings report very extensively and professionally on these things. I think the Board of Supervisors is well educated on the infrastructure needs of the county through Brandon and others. And I think they do a decent job of funding those infrastructure needs. But you always have to be on your toes if there's a washout with a drainage district or a gravel issue with the gravel on the county roads. But what I've also been told by Farm Bureau and others is making these roads as quality as we can, as they can get, is an economic development benefit to the farmers in our area. So I would be committed to doing even more than has been done in the past in that regard.
Mr. Watts.
We've done a fantastic job, which I think my opponent just acknowledged in regards to infrastructure improvements in this county. And Brandon Billings has done a fantastic job. He's been with us for, I believe, 6 years now, going on 6 years. And under his guidance, we've got the new facility out by the law enforcement center, the new facility in Ventura, which better services northwest part of the county, the new facility in Thornton, and we just occupied the new facility on Illinois. And those buildings were made possible because my former colleagues and myself took county land, like the old law enforcement or highway patrol building out on Eisenhower where the Quick Star sits, sold that property, putting that property back on the tax rolls, which was a win-win. And then we used the proceeds from the sale of those buildings to help finance the new buildings and put back in the secondary road fund. So we were very fiscally responsible and trying to give Brandon Billings the resources that he needs to get the job done.
Next question. Needed security improvements were just completed at the front entry of the courthouse. While some other remodeling is taking place, some under the expected life of the current courthouse structure. Does the county need to start looking at the future of the courthouse in total, or are the improvements such as the ones currently being made or having been made, moving the courthouse building in the right direction? Mr. Watts?
That courthouse has been nickel and diming the taxpayers for decades. We put, I don't want to say hundreds of thousands of dollars, but in excess of $100,000 into it in repairs every year. It's like putting a Band-Aid on. Someday it's going to have to be ripped off. Again, as we talked about earlier, fiscal responsibility. Yes, 3-4 years ago, we looked at the principal building, which is sitting vacant downtown, and it would be nice to be in there, but the guy wants too much money for it. If he wants to work with us, and it would be a win-win, because we can move public health, we can move juvenile court services, we can move DHS, we can move the courthouse all into one facility. So you got one-stop shop all under one roof. Just the public health, we pay $178,000 a year in rent. And, between that, DHS, $144,000, JCS, I think is like $40,000 a year. We would save the monies in the rent, but if and when we ever did that, it would go before the public. It would be on a public vote. In the meantime, we're making do with the courthouse, and the improvements on the front entryway were long overdue. So we're trying to get by with what we got, and at the same token, think to the future. Principal never happens. We bought the rest of the SH building behind us, so future boards will own that block. The county will own that block, and future boards someday will be able to build a courthouse there.
Mr. Lapointe.
Thank you, Bob. I agree with my opponent on some of this. I have studied the issues about possibility of a new courthouse and the possibility of the principal building being an option, and taking that property off of the tax rolls didn't seem like a feasible option or a good option. I favor, again, as part of my aggressive economic development approach, helping the city recruit business to go in there and pay huge taxes to the county, and help our county financial situation for the benefit of all, including those agencies that help the less fortunate. The courthouse is an old courthouse. It was a Standard Oil building. My grandfather, as a manager for Standard Oil, worked out of that courthouse, so it's sort of nostalgic for me. And every week I go in there as a lawyer, and I see, and I practiced in over 40 counties in Iowa. I've seen the grandeur of some of these courthouses. I've also seen what Mitchell County did with their bond referendum and built a beautiful new courthouse. It wasn't overdone. It came in within the budget after the referendum. I would be uniquely qualified, will be uniquely qualified as a lawyer in this town for 32 years, knows all the players and the judicial system, to help with the process towards a new courthouse, if that is in the budget.
Okay, 2 more questions for you, and if you could keep answers concise. I want to keep my promise of only keeping you here an hour, so that's the only reason I say that. Mr. Lapointe, you start with this one. Conservation, what needs to be addressed with county conservation and land use?
Well, conservation and land use is also a major thing that the County Board of Supervisors oversees. And I believe that the powers that be do a good job of maintaining their proper conservation techniques and reporting them to the Board of Supervisors. What we need to do better on, according to recent meetings, is maybe educating landowners about things like drainage ditch washouts and other areas in the county that may cause problems with water being backed up or diverted. Also, county conservation, I believe, is also within the purview of county public lands. And parks. And part of my platform is to, not only ensure the safety and efficiency of county roads, ditches, culverts, drainage systems, but also expand expand public parks for recreation and tourism, additional fishing and hunting opportunities. We've got a capital, and I have a bike trail plan that is unique to me. I've talked with other bike trail enthusiasts who have done parts of these trails, and I'm not going to give you the full details because, but it will loop other trails together for the efficient and maximizing tourism opportunities for Cerro Gordo County.
Okay, Mr. Watts.
Well, I think the Conservation Board does a fantastic job right now, and I've got the facts and figures right here with me because I do my homework and stay on top of things. In the last 8 years, going on 8 years, Conservation Board, since I've been there, has added 475 new acres. They have 7 new locations. Of those 7, 4 and part of the 5th one were donated properties, parcels from farmers and estates that donated to the cause. There will be 7 new canoe and kayak launches in the county. As far as the trail system, that's been an active thing for the last 8 years I've been there. We have we're down to Thornton right now. We're going to tie into Wright County, which will tie Wright County, Franklin County, Cerro Gordo County. We're working with the city. Another example of collaborative efforts. We're working with the city right now and tying the city trail system in with the county trail system. And as some people on South Shore and Clear Lake are aware, we just finished that one last spring. So we're very aggressive in that area because we do believe that is an economic development draw to the county also.
And one final question before our closing statements. Mr. Watts, you'll start here. Besides the property tax concerns we addressed earlier, are there any other issues that might be addressed by the legislature in the near future that are a concern to counties? Do you think the state is taking more local control away from county governments?
Yes, I do. They try all the time. CAFOs, which is confined animal feeding operations, hogs. We all eat beef, we all eat pork, we all eat chicken, but I just witnessed it today. Piles of chicken litter sitting around in the rural areas. Nobody wants to smell chicken litter 2 miles away from there. I think I'll just leave it at that for now.
All right, Mr. Lapointe.
Bob, for most of my adult career, I have argued against unfunded mandates from the state to the county level, especially issues like mental health. We're in a crisis in the county on mental health reform and mental health funding. This regionalization, which is recent legislation, has been an utter failure. And I've had lots of constituents come to me and say either they themselves or a loved one is in need of mental health treatment and it's going lacking. There's no more county case management, for God's sake. We need to get back to a system of decency where we help our local people, and the county is in charge of its mentally ill by statute. Hopefully there'll be better legislation for that, but I fear it's going to get worse. And we got to be ready for that with our own plans for case management and other things. There's other unfunded mandates. The AEA system was underfunded and cut extensively by state legislation. The counties are going to have to create a system to be a moral and decent governing body to help some of these people who are left out by the state budget cuts. These are the types of things that are coming from Des Moines. We as a local governing body have to be ready.
Well, gentlemen, we're at the closing portion of our program this evening, and it's time for each candidate to give you those watching out on NorthIowaNow.com and our NorthIowaNow.com Facebook site. It's time for each candidate to give you their final pitch on why you should be electing them. Once again, each candidate will be allotted 2 minutes to give their final message to voters. We'll allow each candidate a few extra seconds to wrap up if they are at that 2-minute mark. But we will stop a candidate if too much time has been taken. And I know the question was asked before we started, what kind of an indication would be given if we get low on time? I'll just wave my hand if you've got 20 seconds left. So I apologize. I didn't think of that before we started. So the first closing remark, Mr. Lapointe.
Thank you, Bob. And thank you again for the opportunity to be here and explain who I am and why I believe I'll be best for this county. I was born and raised right here in River City. I'm married to my beautiful wife, Sheila, who is my biggest source of support. I have 3 awesome children that were raised here in Mason City, all attended Newman High School, Newman Catholic High School in Mason City, as did I. I'm a progressive Democrat, and I don't try to hide my political affiliation. I was raised with an emphasis on social conscience and support of the poor. I don't think local politics needs to be partisan. I promise to reach across the aisle to get things done. I have a strong track record of doing this, and I want to be bipartisan in my leadership to Cerro Gordo County. There are a lot of important and difficult issues facing our county at this time, as we've discussed in this last hour. I'm opposed to the CO2 pipeline because it's an improper use of eminent domain and only going for private gain, and will be, as I said earlier, an incredible waste of water, 47 million gallons a day. I'm for exploring clean energy options, so long as they give due respect and deference to neighboring landowners affected. And I want to say, if these things come to Cerro Gordo County, you got to have leaders ready to help soften the blow with proper resolutions, setback requirements, and other things. I will be uniquely qualified to read, review, and draft those types of resolutions. I'm for fair wages for county workers. We have beat that issue. And in 10 years, I have consistently fought for increased wages for county workers. I will not promise you one thing one year and take it back the next. I believe local politics should have one priority, and that is economic development. And I believe that we all do better when we all do better. A vote for me is a vote for us.
Mr. Lapointe, thank you very much. Mr. Watts, your final remarks.
All right. As most know, I've been to the doors many times. I do my own door knocking. I don't have door knockers. I like to go out and meet the people, hear your concerns, and that's what I live by every day when I go to represent you. When I was talking about CAFOs a little bit ago in regards to the state of Iowa and their control, they proposed they wanted to take control over wind and solar. You know, they're in the process of taking control over mental health again. That's what's got to stop. That's the 2-hour meeting I was on this afternoon, CICS, Central Iowa Community Services. The state, they had it before, they failed. We created regions. We were successful at doing that. Now the state's taking it back over. So that's what I'm concerned about. And that's what we got to talk to our representatives and senators about. One other thing I really wanted to emphasize is the perception. The perception I've given everybody going door to door, my reputation, my experience, the things I've done in this county should speak for themselves. I don't put out there that we don't underfund the libraries or whatnot. As a matter of fact, that's one of the things I wanted to mention. According to state law, we're supposed to give 6.75 cents per $1,000 of taxable property value in the unincorporated areas, which comes up to $75,000. We gave them $219,000. We overfunded the libraries by $144,000 because we believe in it. We believe it's important to the citizens of this county. We do what we can, and I don't promise what we can't do. We just try and get the job done.
Mr. Watts, thank you for your closing comments. Chris Watts, the Republican incumbent, the challenger, Tim Lapointe, the Democrat. Gentlemen, I want to thank you once again for agreeing to join us tonight for a discussion of the county level issues.
Thanks for putting this on, Bob.
You bet. And folks, remember to join us coming up at 7 o'clock on Monday night, as we'll do this again with the 3rd District candidates, Democratic incumbent Lori Meacham G-Knapp and Republican challenger Carl G-Knapp. Of course, make sure that you share this website, share this video. If you're on Facebook and watching it that way, of course, you can easily share this with your friends and family and let them know about NorthIowaNow.com with Koloff Media. You've been watching our discussion with the candidates running for the 1st District seat on the Cerro Gordo County Board of Supervisors. This has been a presentation of Koloff Media here in Mason City and NorthIowaNow.com News. I'm News Director Bob Fisher, and we wish you a good evening.